Pop quiz, hot shot. Speed wasn't just another action flick about a bus rigged with explosives. It was a relentless, nerve-shattering experiment in pure cinematic adrenaline. What audiences saw was non-stop thrills, but behind the camera, chaos simmered. From stunts gone wrong to casting wars, studio interference, and a script that almost never got made, the film's road to release was as wild as the bus barreling down the freeway. Today, we're diving into 20 weird facts about Speed that reveal its hidden disasters, secret battles, and shocking truths. And stick around, because the bonus fact might just be the strangest story of all. Buckle up. Let's floor it. The original script looked nothing like the movie. When writer Graham Yost first pitched Speed, the film wasn't even about a bus. His draft revolved around a runaway subway train, more in line with a contained thriller. Studio execs dismissed it, saying audiences wouldn't stay engaged unless the stakes felt unpredictable. That's when Yost added the infamous bus concept. Ironically, the third act still circles back to the subway, an echo of his original vision. It wasn't just rewriting, it was salvaging. What's crazy is that Speed could have been a low-key transit thriller instead of the high-octane spectacle we know. Imagine no bus, no freeway, and no stay above 50 miles per hour. Without that fateful rewrite, the film might never have exploded into the blockbuster that redefined 90 seconds action cinema. Sometimes desperation writes history. Keanu Reeves almost said no. Believe it or not, Keanu Reeves wasn't the first choice for Jack Traven. In fact, the studio wanted Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, or even Johnny Depp. Reeves only signed on after significant hesitation. He feared being typecast as another generic action hero. But director Jan de Bont convinced him to cut his hair short, ditch the typical muscle-bound cop aesthetic, and play Traven as sharp but understated. That shaved head caused a stir. The studio panicked, saying Reeves looked too boyish. Yet his stripped-down style turned out to be revolutionary, reshaping how 90 Seconds heroes could look calm, competent, not cartoonish. Without Reeves's quiet intensity, Speed might have been a campy disaster, not Die Hard on a bus, but more like cop drama on a treadmill. Sandra Bullock had to pass a driving test 3 times. Sandra Bullock wasn't handed the role of Annie Porter without some proving ground. Producers wanted authenticity, so they forced her to pass a stunt driving course before being cast. The kicker? She failed the test twice. Her eventual pass was shaky at best, but director Jan de Bont saw her natural nervousness as perfect for Annie's energy. What audiences didn't know is that in many of the bus driving shots, Bullock is actually behind the wheel, terrified but committed. In some takes, her jerky maneuvers made seasoned stunt drivers queasy. Not a stunt double, not green screen. Bullock was really navigating a giant bus at speed. The irony? The character Annie is supposed to be terrible at driving. Sandra's real struggles became part of the character DNA, blurring reality and performance. The bus jump nearly killed the crew. The most jaw-dropping moment in Speed, the bus leaping a broken freeway gap, wasn't just movie magic. It was a practical stunt, and it almost killed everyone involved. Stunt coordinators had miscalculated the trajectory. The bus was too heavy, the ramp too unstable. When the vehicle launched, it pitched higher than expected, crashing down hard and damaging the cameras meant to capture the scene. Crew members dove for cover. In the end, the shot we see on screen required piecing together limited usable footage with clever editing. What seems like a smooth stunt was, in reality, a dangerous, nearly uncontrolled disaster. It wasn't clean movie magic, it was survival. That jump became the film's defining shot, but behind it was pure chaos, proving how close Speed flirted with catastrophe. Dennis Hopper, didn't understand the villain at all. Dennis Hopper, cast as Mad Bomber Howard Payne, admitted later he didn't fully get the character. To him, Payne seemed more like a plot device than a man. Instead of going deep into method, Hopper leaned into a kind of gleeful chaos, improvising lines like "pop quiz, hot shot" on set. The result? A villain who was both terrifying and strangely charismatic. What fans didn't know is that Hopper had a habit of wandering off set between takes, sometimes disappearing for hours. The crew joked he was as unpredictable as the bomb itself. Payne wasn't written as iconic, but Hopper's manic energy turned him into one of the most unforgettable villains of the decade. It wasn't careful planning, but raw unpredictability that gave Speed its pulse-pounding antagonist. The freeway wasn't finished, and that saved the movie. The Los Angeles freeway system was under heavy construction in the early 90s, which turned out to be a blessing. The production needed wide, empty stretches of road where they could drive a speeding bus without endangering the public. Caltrans agreed to let them shoot on an unfinished section of the 105 freeway before it opened. That's right, the chaos you see in Speed is happening on brand new pavement not yet touched by commuters. Crews had to work fast. The freeway was scheduled to open only weeks later. Without this lucky timing, the filmmakers might have been forced onto closed sets or backlots, killing the sense of realism. Instead, they got a wide-open canvas for madness. Not a soundstage illusion, but a real highway holding its breath for cinematic destruction. The script needed Joss Whedon's secret touch. Here's a shocker. Much of the dialogue in Speed wasn't Graham Yost's. Enter Joss Whedon, yes, the same guy who later created Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He was brought in to punch up the script, and according to Reeves, Whedon wrote about 90% of the dialogue. That means Annie's quips, Jack's deadpan lines, even Payne's sarcastic one-liners carry Whedon's fingerprints. Yet Whedon didn't receive official credit. The Writers Guild awarded sole writing recognition to Yost, sparking quiet frustration in Hollywood circles. The irony? Speed's snappy exchanges are part of what kept it from being just another action movie. Not just explosions, but character-driven sparks. What the credits don't reveal is that the DNA of Speed's voice, witty, human, biting, was forged by a writer audiences didn't even know was there. Keanu did most of his own stunts against orders. Keanu Reeves was determined to bring grit to Jack Traven. But that meant defying insurance policies. Reeves insisted on performing most of his own stunts, including sliding under buses and hanging out of speeding vehicles. Studio executives panicked, fearing their lead actor could be injured or worse. In one infamous shot where Jack rolls under the bus to defuse the bomb, Reeves performed the stunt himself, scraping his back raw on the asphalt. The production medic reportedly begged him to stop, but Reeves's philosophy was simple. If audiences believed he was really there, the tension would hit harder. Not stunt doubles, not trick shots, just raw commitment. Reeves's body was bruised for months. His stubborn insistence gave Speed a physical authenticity you can't fake. The pain was real, and so was the payoff. Sandra Bullock was almost replaced. Sandra Bullock is now synonymous with Annie Porter, but casting her was a gamble. At the time, she wasn't a household name. Producers were nervous and pushed for more bankable stars like Halle Berry. Berry famously turned the role down, citing script concerns. Even after Bullock was cast, there were whispers she might not test well with audiences. But then came chemistry tests with Reeves. When the two read scenes together, sparks flew. DeBont said their rapport was instant and undeniable. Studio hesitation evaporated after seeing their connection. Not just co-stars, but an anchor for the film's beating heart. Without Bullock, Speed might have been cold action spectacle. With her, it became a love story on wheels. A near-miss casting turned into one of the most iconic pairings of the decade. The bus exploded in the wrong place. When it came time to film the climactic explosion of the bus, things went sideways, literally. The crew had carefully rigged the vehicle with explosives meant to detonate at a precise camera angle, but during the shoot, the bus drifted off course, hitting the explosives in the wrong spot. Instead of a clean cinematic blast, the detonation went off awkwardly, obscuring some of the planned shots. DeBont was furious, thinking they'd lost the money shot. But in editing, they realized the chaotic, imperfect explosion looked even more raw and terrifying. What was supposed to be precise destruction became untamed spectacle. It wasn't polished, but it was unforgettable. And speaking of unforgettable, before we get to the next jaw-dropping reveal, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts are even wilder. 11. The bus was doctored to look slower than it was. Here's the trick. The bus in Speed wasn't just speeding, it was modified to appear slower on screen. For safety, many freeway shots had the bus going closer to 20-30 miles per hour, not 50. Cinematographers used undercranked cameras and tight angles to make it seem like the bus was tearing down the highway at dangerous speeds. In some dailies, you can see cars creeping along, revealing the actual pace. DeBont later admitted the illusion was critical. Audiences believed every second counted, when in reality, the set was carefully controlled. Not reckless chaos, but careful manipulation of film stock and perspective. The irony? The most famous line, "Stay above 50," was often just a cinematic lie. Movie magic made danger look real, while stunt drivers quietly kept things just shy of deadly. A bus literally fell apart during filming. During one sequence, a bus used for close-up shots began rattling violently. Midway through a take, a wheel snapped clean off, sending sparks across the freeway. Cast and crew were shaken, but cameras kept rolling until the vehicle ground to a halt. The accident exposed a hidden problem. The buses had been over-modified for stunts, weakening their frames. From then on, mechanics were stationed on set around the clock. Not a simple prop malfunction, but a full mechanical breakdown that nearly shut the production down. Sandra Bullock reportedly joked, "Annie's driving again," to ease tension, but the danger was no laughing matter. What audiences saw as slick action sequences often relied on buses that were barely holding together, threatening collapse at any wrong move. Speed wasn't just about a bomb, it was about survival. The sound design turned metal into music. The pulse of Speed didn't just come from the script, it came from its sound. Sound designers layered industrial noises, distorted train screeches, and helicopter rotors into the roar of the bus engine. What audiences didn't know is that the famous brake squeal tension was created by dragging metal tools across chalkboards, then amplifying the pitch. Even the ticking of the bomb was mixed with the sound of a rattlesnake's warning hiss. Not just sound effects, but an auditory assault engineered for panic. In theaters, the low-frequency rumble made seats vibrate, pushing tension into viewers' bodies. What looked like a simple chase scene was underscored by a symphony of manipulated noise designed to trigger fear. Not visuals alone, but an entire sensory experience. The film literally sounded like anxiety. Reeves took a pay cut to keep the film authentic. By the mid-90 seconds, Reeves was becoming a bankable star, but Speed wasn't a guaranteed hit. Studio execs suggested scaling back the story or adding lighter moments to broaden its appeal. Reeves reportedly slashed his own salary demands to keep the film gritty, insisting the story stay focused on relentless action. His sacrifice bought more budget for stunts and on-location shoots, not vanity, but commitment to authenticity. What audiences didn't know was that Reeves's quiet refusal to cash in preserved the movie's sharp edge. It wasn't a careerist move, it was loyalty to a vision. In the end, Speed grossed over $350 million worldwide. Reeves could have padded his paycheck, but instead gave the film its fuel. Not every star is willing to bleed for their movie. He did. The subway finale nearly didn't happen. Remember the chaotic subway crash at the climax? That wasn't always part of the plan. Early drafts ended with the bus explosion, but test audiences complained it felt abrupt. The studio demanded a new ending. With little time, de Bont resurrected Graham Yost's original runaway train concept. The subway finale was slapped together quickly, using miniatures, partial sets, and clever editing. But the rushed timeline created real hazards tracks warped under the weight of stunt cars, and sparks ignited set materials more than once. Still, the sequence added the exclamation mark the film desperately needed. Not just a new ending, but a salvaged fragment of the script's earliest draft. What looked seamless on screen was actually patched together under brutal deadlines. Ironically, the file almost derailed the movie but instead cemented its legend. The bus number wasn't random. Audiences may not think twice about it, but the bus number 2525 wasn't chosen by accident. Graham Yost revealed that he picked it for rhythm. "There's something about the repetition," he explained. "It also carries a subtle irony. The 2525 cadence mirrors a ticking clock, reinforcing the constant countdown motif woven through the film." Some fans later noted that 25 plus 25 equals 50, the infamous speed limit. Whether intentional or happy accident, the digits created subliminal tension every time they appeared on screen. Not just a number painted on metal, but a psychological reminder of the stakes. Even the smallest details in Speed were engineered for unease. Behind the roar of the engine and the threat of the bomb, that 4-digit riddle whispered, "This ride was never going to slow down." Jan de Bont's past accident shaped the film. Director Jan de Bont wasn't just obsessed with danger, he'd lived it. Years earlier, while working as cinematographer on Roar 1981, he was mauled by a lion, nearly losing part of his scalp. That brush with chaos gave him a taste for films that felt raw and uncontrollable. On Speed, he pushed his crew past comfort zones, insisting on practical stunts over safe illusions. He wanted the audience to feel the danger he once faced in real life. The result? Shots that look like accidents caught on camera. What fans didn't know is that the movie's relentless tension wasn't just cinematic craft, it was de Bont exercising trauma, not just adrenaline on celluloid, but an artist chasing the edge where safety breaks and survival takes over. His scars were Speed's fuel. Fox thought the movie would flop. Before release, 20th Century Fox executives were nervous. Market research showed that audiences didn't care about a bus that can't slow down. Trailers tested poorly, and insiders whispered the film would sink. Studio heads even slashed marketing budgets, treating Speed as a mid-tier summer filler. But then came early test screenings, audiences went wild, applauding mid-film. Word of mouth spread like wildfire, and the studio scrambled to reallocate funds for promotion. What execs thought was a dud became a runaway juggernaut, earning over $350 million worldwide. Not failure, but phenomenon. Ironically, Fox had underestimated the very thing that made the movie unique, its absurdly simple, high-concept hook. What Hollywood dismissed as a joke turned into the very formula the industry chased for the rest of the decade. Sandra Bullock's career exploded overnight. Before Speed, Sandra Bullock had floated between rom-coms and supporting roles. Annie Porter changed everything. Critics praised her charm, relatability, and grounding presence amid chaos. Overnight, she became America's sweetheart. But what fans didn't know is that Bullock almost walked away mid-production. Exhausted by grueling hours and stunt-driving stress, she reportedly questioned whether she was right for the role. Keanu Reeves convinced her to stick it out, telling her, "You are Annie." That quiet encouragement reshaped Hollywood. Without Bullock, the film might have lost its heart. With her, Speed became a love story hidden inside an action thriller. Not just career-making, but career-defining. What seemed like another casting choice became destiny, launching Bullock into superstardom and altering the course of 90-second cinema forever. The sequel almost starred a totally different cast. When Speed 2, Cruise Control hit theaters in 1997, fans were baffled that Reeves wasn't on board. What they didn't know is that early drafts didn't include Bullock either. The studio briefly considered recasting both leads, envisioning Speed as an anthology franchise, different characters, different vehicles, same ticking bomb premise. But when Bullock agreed to return, Fox doubled down on keeping continuity, even without Reeves. The irony? Bullock later admitted she regretted doing the sequel, calling it a career mistake. The film bombed critically and commercially, cementing its place as one of the worst sequels ever made. Not continuation, but collapse. Speed was lightning in a bottle, impossible to replicate. The attempt to turn it into a franchise proved what insiders already knew. Sometimes you can't push fate past 50. The script was originally called Minimum Speed. Here's the kicker. Before anyone thought of the sleek, one-word title, the working script circulated under the name Minimum Speed. Yes, Minimum Speed. Graham Yost admitted he struggled with what to call it, and early drafts used the clunky placeholder. Can you imagine audiences buying tickets for Minimum Speed? It sounds more like a DMV instructional video than an action blockbuster. It wasn't until a studio exec suggested dropping the minimum that the title snapped into place. Suddenly, it wasn't bureaucratic, it was urgent, sharp, and unforgettable. The title alone transformed how the movie was pitched and sold. Not just semantics, but identity. Without that last-minute change, Speed might never have become the cultural juggernaut we remember. Sometimes the smallest edits carry the biggest explosions. Speed wasn't just a movie about a bus and a bomb. It was a reckless experiment in tension, born from rewrites, near disasters, and stubborn creative choices. What looked effortless on screen was really blood, bruises, broken buses, and last-second fixes stitched together. Its legacy endures because it wasn't polished. It was raw, immediate, and alive. If you enjoyed this ride, hit that like button, subscribe for more cinematic secrets, and remember, movies don't just happen, they barely survive the chaos that makes them immortal.